Welcome again to the Law, Policing and Justice Podcast, Episode 3. My name is Noreen Chowdhury. I am the lead and solicitor for the Legal Advice Centre at the University of East London, USS Stratford campus. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the topic on policing. We have a guest today who is a senior lecturer for the Law, Policing and Justice Department at the University of East London.
Hello, I'm Roland Uduaghe Pereira. I'm the Director of Policing, Criminology and Justice, and also run the Peel Centre, which is the Policing, Innovation, Enterprise and Learning Centre at the University of East London.
Thank you, Ruben. Now I will let the students introduce themselves and then put their questions forward to Ruben. Over to you guys.
Hello, my name is Chima Onwekwe Chimnoyelu. I'm a law student at the University of East London.
Hi, my name is Fatima Begum. I'm one of the LPC students. I've graduated from University of East London.
Hi, my name is Glory Williams and I am a first-year law with criminology student.
Hi, my name is Ioana and I'm a final year student at Stratford campus of East London University.
So, our first question, please can you tell us what is policing?
What is policing? That's an exceptionally good question. Policing originally, if we go back in history, policing actually just merely meant the adherence to policy. That's all it meant. But policing has a different meaning in different countries.
Maybe we can talk about England and Wales.
England and Wales. Okay, what is England? Policing in England and Wales. Okay, the model of policing in England and Wales first developed in 1829 with the introduction of the Metropolitan Police. And the idea of policing then was, well, there's two ideas. There's the official line, which was the protection of life and property, the introduction of the protection of life and property for the people. Prior to that, there had been a model of policing that was not particularly efficient. But in 1829, with the Industrial Revolution, etc., urban areas were increasing, and with urban areas increasing, obviously crime and deviance went up, and suddenly there was a need for a police service. Britain had tried, or England had fought against the idea of a police service up until that point. On the continent, they had police services. So I spoke about the protection of life and property. 1829, protection of life and property, of course, really meant the protection of the lives of the people who own the property. And no one in this room would have come under that definition.
And that leads us to the next question. How long have you been working in this area and what do you like about it?
I joined the police service in 1982.
Oh, wow.
There we go. So before any of you were born, literally. What an awful thing to have to say. So I joined in 1982. So I joined a year after the Scarman report into the riots, into Brixton, Toxteth, Bristol, etc., the inner city riots. The Scarman report didn't identify institutional racism, but what it identified was rotten apples within the police service. I would suggest it's slightly more than rotten apples. I would say we have rotten lorry loads rather than the odd apple in the barrel.
What are the challenges you face in this area?
Challenges around policing. Well, obviously I've been a police officer and I'm now an academic within the sphere of policing. Obviously I cover a wider area of research, but my area of research, which goes back, predates me leaving the police service actually, is around police reform. Areas of difficult hurdles, resistance, I would suggest. So resistance to change. So no matter how many reports, so whether it be the Scarman report 81, whether it be Stephen Lawrence's report, whether it be a plethora of thematic reports between, and then now we have the Casey review. They're all saying the same thing, but there's resistance to change. So I would suggest that is the biggest hurdle.
One other thing we would like to find is, in your view, what are some common misconceptions of people have about police work?
Mainly probably about the role of the police itself. The British model of policing is based on the police being the public and the public are the police. That's a principle of policing. And community engagement, public engagement is core since 1829 to the British police model. But there are numerous communities within the UK, across the whole of the UK, not just England and Wales, who would find that completely at odds with their experience. So I would say the divergence from what the police service should be to what it is the big area.
Okay, still on that, looking ahead, what changes or reforms do you believe are necessary to ensure that policing remains effective, fair, and accountable in the future?
This is my area of research, but I would actually being slightly cruel, I would throw that back at yourselves, because you are members of the public.
Yeah.
And if the police are the public and the public are the police, what do you believe that they should be the concerns of the police? Because the police should be in service to the public, not the other way around. So I would throw that back and say, what does the public genuinely want from its police service? Is the current model appropriate? Here in London, for example, there's talk about breaking the Metropolitan Police up. There is actually no reason to do that because it's already borough-based, and the boroughs are coterminous with councils, etc. It could very easily be reformed so that there is greater influence from the public sector, from the council, for example.
Yeah.
The chief executive of the council could actually run the borough. The police commander could be the operational expert, yes, and they do the ops, but the actual, the wider issues could be dealt with by the senior management team of the local authority, who work in partnership with education, with housing, all the other statutory agencies. So there is a way of having greater public accountability without breaking the service up. And that could be done nationwide. So you actually could have a national police service that operates at a local level by being coterminous with the local authority.
And how do you see the future of policing evolving, and what changes do you anticipate in the coming years?
Well, again, there's another question I'll throw back, because in The Guardian only this morning, it states that here in London, and it's similar across the rest of the country, there's only 40% support for the police service. What do you want? Because the important thing is the public. Now, I'm somewhat biased, am I not? I'm not a traditional member of the public. I'm still involved in policing. I still work with police agencies. In education as well as externally. So I'm not an unbiased individual here. It's important that members of the public start to have greater influence over the priorities of the policing of their areas.
What are your thoughts about the representation, the diversity in policing? Because I believe if there's a lot of diversity in the department, it would there'll be representation of the public in the department, if you get what I mean.
Yes, so you need to be careful with that one. Yes, we need greater diversity within the police service to be representative of society, but do you really want to represent the worst elements of society? So be careful what you wish for when it comes to representing, okay? Certainly the police service needs to be far more representative on grounds such as race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, etc., etc., etc. Yes, but do you really want, there's already fairly high levels of corruption within policing, do you want that to be increased by the levels of corruption in wider society? So we need to be careful what we mean by representation of diversity. I would suggest, and just increasing diversity alone doesn't do it. The culture of policing is so strong that people are sucked into that culture no matter their background very, very, very quickly. If they rebel, the chances are they won't get through their probation. And then on top of that, you only have to look at the statistics for the levels of people of colour who end up in disciplinaries within the police service. It shows that actually it's disproportionate to other members of society.
The question is, what motivates you to pursue a career in law enforcement, and what advice would you give to students considering this path?
Well, I think my motivation and what I would say to someone else are totally different. I only joined the police service because someone told me I couldn't. So, no, there was no noble rationale for me joining the police service. None whatsoever, okay? Someone said I wouldn't last 5 minutes. And I'm a stubborn individual, and so I did it. I lasted 25 years. And my own rationale for joining, you can't take. Once I was in, I got sucked into, as I said, the culture was very, very strong. And I was involved in, I did all sorts of manner of things I regret, absolutely, and I will never be able to atone for. But following on from 1998 onwards, I was involved in the development of the National Black Police Association movement, and I was its first elected General Secretary. We have a conference here tomorrow on campus for the MBPA. And so I was, so since 1998, I've been involved in very much the politics of policing, specifically around marginalised communities, underrepresented communities, etc., equality issues. Prior to that, I had been 10 years, over 12 years in fact, I was a firearms officer. So, completely different role.
My next question will be, can you discuss any partnership or collaborations you in your department has with local law enforcement agency or community organizations to enhance students' learning and community engagement?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So my background is actually, I was one of the co-authors of the National Community Cohesion Guidance. So community engagement is something I do still outside in my life. But within the university, we're forging links with, for example, the Newham Community Project. I work very closely with them.
Brilliant.
And Rosina, one of our former students, now at Cambridge doing a PhD. So there's lots of local agencies we work very closely with. And one of the things we're trying to expand on is locally is the whole knife crime issue. There's a different perspective here in London than there was, say, for example, in Scotland with regard to knife crime. Knife crime in London and other English large cities has been racialised. And in racialising it, they're not going to tackle the causes of knife crime. They're just putting blame somewhere. Knife crime is not down to, there's no DNA, biological reason for knife crime. There's clear causes of knife crime. And Scotland, for example, was the lead for knife crime in the whole of Europe. So you were a greater chance of being stabbed in Scotland than you would here in London, yeah. Yeah, well, London's terribly, although I'm a Londoner, Londoners don't generally think outside the M25. There is a world outside of the M25, okay? And actually, I'm not even sure if they think from the green bit to the M25, actually. But if there's not street lamps, they're not really sure. So, so Scotland had the highest knife crime and had for decades, actually. Now, they have reduced that significantly by taking a health and well-being approach. And it's not a blame game approach, it's a health and well-being. Whether the person's a victim or the offender, most of the offenders are victims, as in many other crimes. People carry knives for a plethora of reasons, but I've never met someone who carries a knife with the intent of using it. And I've got skin in the game on this one. One of my mentees, sadly, was murdered in a knife crime incident. But he had been an offender of knife crime as well. So he had been bullied. He is a young man from Jamaica. He arrived here when he was 10. And from the time he was 10 to the time he left secondary school, he was bullied constantly by specific people. One night he's out. His first time, he came from a very strict conservative background, very church-focused background. He was allowed out to go to a big football fan, a fantastic sportsman. So he ended up going to, his football club was being elevated to the first division or something, whatever the divisions are. And he went along to the celebrations. And on his way home, lo and behold, there is the offender.
Oh, no.
The person who'd been bullying him for years and years and years.
Oh, no.
And my mentee, yes, he was carrying a knife on him. It was a kitchen knife, as most knife attacks are. Not the big machetes or anything, it was just a little kitchen knife. It was for peeling potatoes sort of thing, that size. And there's the abuser who's drunk, now starts abusing him again, and my young man lashes out. First offence, straight to Her Majesty's Youth Offending Centre, where he was in the Youth Offending Centre. They are, unfortunately, they're very gang-oriented, and if you're not in the gang, you're going to be persecuted. No, he was 6'4", worked out in the gym every day. He didn't get bullied, but there was an attempt to try to pressurise him to become in the one of the gangs. He wouldn't do that. Thought that was wrong. But whilst in prison, he was sexually assaulted by the prison wardens. We brought that to light. He then got moved to another prison because of this, where he lost all his rights. In moving, they lose their rights. Yeah. So he moved to another youth offending centre where he lost all his rights. And whilst he was in prison, his grandmother died, who was his carer, primary carer. So 2 weeks before he was due to come out, and I made representation that he should come. I'd pick him up and take him. Yeah. They wouldn't allow that, so they sent 3 prison wardens. So he's handcuffed in the front row of a Baptist church for his grands. I mean, how humiliating. So knife crime is one of the issues we are looking at. As I say, we've got staff members whose children have been stabbed. Yeah. We have counsellors whose children have been stabbed in this area. It's an issue we need to tackle, but it can't be tackled in the way the Metropolitan Police has been doing. It's got to be done through a health and wellbeing approach. And we've got the facilities at the University of East London, some amazing facilities. For example, our nursing facilities. We have an entire casualty. I don't know if you've ever been into it. It gives me the creeps. It smells. It's a casualty. It smells like a casualty. It is a casualty. All the equipment works, you know. They have these mannequins everywhere. The mannequins are absolutely lifelike. And there's a story about where they come from, which is rather amusing. But no, so the idea is we use that facility for the training of young people to dissuade them from the carrying and use of knives. So from a health and wellbeing approach. So one of our visiting professors is Niven Rennie, Professor Niven Rennie, and he ran the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit that pioneered all this. So UEL was in an ideal position to do this. The local authorities are up for this, local NHS are up for it. So this is something we're going to start working on very, very shortly. And there's other things we can use it for. So if you think that facility alone, here in Stratford, Newham, we have many marginalised communities who have a fear of the NHS. Well, we've got the facilities to do familiarisation training so that people reduce their fear of the NHS and they start using the facilities that they should be. So lots of things. We're also working on the issues of Uber riders are being attacked, robbed, and percentage of those Uber riders, as you know, are our students. So UEL has a responsibility to be far more involved in the community. And we are doing other things as well. So that's just a few of the things.
I just want to reflect regarding the knife crime, as you mentioned. What advice you can give it to our local younger generations that what they can do to stop?
It's not about advice from
how?
Advice from a silver-haired old man like me.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you can do it.
Well, I am silver-haired.
You're very experienced.
It's an irrelevance. It's about enabling communities to enable communities to actually solve these issues in partnership. Yes, it's not putting the blame on communities because it's not communities. Of course not. But it's about the public sector. And the voluntary sector and the private sector working far closer together. One thing that's lacking in Newham and across London really, and across many areas, is it's a 4-letter word. It's called hope. Many of our most marginalised communities have no hope whatsoever. Success for them is the drug dealer. No, that's their visual sign of success going down the road. Yeah. Is the guy in that flash car who's the drug dealer, etc. That has to go, and that isn't by then attacking the drug dealer, going, yes, that needs to be dealt with, but we need to be providing that hope. We need to be providing the opportunities. And I think that's where UEL could expand its influence. It could be far better at this than it is. It's good, but it could be better. It could be pioneers in UK on this issue.
The next question would be, how do you envision the future of policing education, and what opportunities do you see for innovation and improvement in preparing the next generation of law enforcement professionals?
Okay. Well, firstly, let me ask you a question. Do you believe police officers should be graduates?
Graduates? Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay. Again, I've got skin in that game by virtue of the fact that I was involved in the development of the original idea around concept of police officers requiring degrees. We now have that, but we don't. So the principle of police officers having a degree, I'm absolutely in favour of, and I'll stand by. How it's been applied under the current government, etc., and especially here in London, where a multi-billion pound arms dealer, Babcock, was given a contract to educate the police service, the Metropolitan Police, but they say the word train, by the way. Now, there's a big difference between training and education. When I was a firearms officer, I trained. It's about muscle memory. It's about doing the same thing thousands and thousands of times. When it comes to education, it's called the Socratic methods. It's about critical thinking. The current police programme does not deserve to have a degree onto it, and it is absent in criticality. In fact, when I ran the programme for a while, and I was instructed by the arms dealers, Babcock, not to mention the Sarah Everard murder. And I was instructed that my lecturers were not ever to mention the Sarah Everard murder. So I said, you clearly don't know me. If I wasn't going to anyway, I'm leaving here now and I'm going to instruct them to specifically mention the Sarah Everard, and constantly. But that's the problem where you've got a third party being brought in to education, and they're not educationalists. They are there to make profit for their shareholders. It's got nothing to do with the education and the benefit of the citizens of London, residents of London. So it's the application of the approach that's being taken I'm against. It lacked criticality. It lacked the causes of crime, the criminology aspects, the social science aspects. It basically was national police training, but with a degree stamp. So it wasn't fit for purpose, and is not fit for purpose. So now, we run that programme still, so clearly I'm at odds with the university on that one. But I will stand by that. And I'm on public record of saying so.
Okay, thank you for your responses so far. Moving on to the more serious questions around policing. In respect of the findings in the Cassie report, if you were the commissioner today, what would you do to make the Metropolitan Police more accountable?
Well, first let me say the Casey review was a mere scratch on the veneer. It was not an in-depth, and I wrote in The Guardian shortly after it was released how it was merely a veneer. There was no depth to that investigation. Yet still, Baroness Casey came out with some rather impressive recommendations. Had only she done her job properly. Why? What would she have found then? Because I genuinely think it was a shallow, very, very shallow investigation. In fact, I contacted the Casey Review to give evidence. No one responded. And I know of many people who contacted the Casey Review and never ever got a response. So it was very shallow, but still, it was more impacted. It's been certainly has the potential to be more impacted than the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, which back in at the launch of the National Black Police Association, I stood there with the Lawrence family and others, and we believed that was going to be the sea change in policing. It didn't happen. Now, I believe, and I think the public needs to hold the police service and the government to account on this one. For Sarah Everard's death to be genuinely, her as an individual respected, and there to be a genuine positive legacy, there has to be change. Now, I think there's a greater chance of change now simply because raping, murdering and setting fire to a white middle-class woman counts as more important than the murder of a black young man, and many young black men actually. So one white female, far more important to society, sadly. But hopefully that will actually cause change, and that's what we've got to force. We've got to push for it. And that means the community's got to be pushing.
Speaking of changes, what measures would you put in to root out the police or identify bad officers?
Right, the rotten apples.
Yes.
How do we seek out these individual rotten apples? These one or two rotten apples that nobody seems to know until they do something wrong. One of it wasn't Wayne Couzens, it was David Carrick, the rapist, police officer rapist. His nickname, I believe it was him, it was either him or Wayne Couzens. Their nickname was the rapist. So, sorry, where are they? So who's the rotten apple? Obviously Wayne Couzens and David Carrick were rotten apples. So those around, rotten apples, it has an effect, doesn't it? Rotten apples starts to rot the apples around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many other rotten apples, they're not guilty of rape, but they're certainly guilty of colluding and hiding the fact that they believe this person to be at fault. So how many of those? Now, again, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan seems to be very glib and very proud of the fact he's 2,000, allegedly, whatever number is, it's in the thousands, of officers being investigated. I'm horrified by that. That's nothing to be proud of, because simply sacking people is not going to resolve the issue. Yes, obviously they do need to go, but simply sacking them is not. There needs to be a change of culture. The culture in policing is rotten to the core. That's not me saying individual police officers are rotten to the core, okay? I'm proud to say some of the finest people I've ever met are police officers, all liable to do the most daft things in certain situations, and I put my hands up to that as well. But I'm proud to say I'm still friends with many, and I know of many. But the culture is rotten to the core, and the culture must change. The culture of policing does not believe itself to be in service to the public. And until it gets over that one, until it acknowledges and embraces and is proud of the fact it is a service that at times has to use force, and I say that as a former firearms officer, but it is a service. And their first role is the protection of life and property of the public.
How do we change this culture within the police to make it more representative?
You have a right to vote.
Sure. Well,
And I have to say this, obviously I'm not going to give away as an academic what my political beliefs are. It's slightly obvious, but I'm not into saying who you should vote, people should vote for. But I am actually horrified by the number of our students who do not vote, who do not get engaged in, and I'm not saying who they should vote for, not saying at all. But it horrifies me, the number of students who do not vote. I was in academia at the time of Brexit, for example. The number of students who were totally anti the idea of Brexit, but did nothing, and now are whinging about the results is terrible, okay? We could have not had Brexit had the students in the country voted the way they claimed they were thinking. So young people have to take more responsibility. I'm all for lowering the age of voting down to 16. I'm all for that. But with the right to vote comes a responsibility. And I don't think the British people are very good when it comes to demonstrating their responsibility with regard to voting. Which other countries, interestingly, are far more responsible. And you know, all of us here are from different backgrounds, and we represent countries where voting is taken far more seriously by the public. But here in the UK, there's a lazy, I'll never have an influence sort of approach. Well, that's exactly how extremists and this government of extremists got in.
So my question will be, why is there apparently more awareness about the fellows of policing following the death of Sarah Everett, than following the death of Stephen Lawrence?
Well, I go back to what I said earlier on. I think it's quite simple, and it needs to be said. A white middle-class woman's life is worth more than a black young man.
Okay.
Simple as that. There's no nice way of saying that. Well, there are probably nice ways of saying that, but that's a reality. for many, many people in society, the death of a white middle-class woman was far more horrific than hearing about yet another black young man dying. And of course the difference between the two was Stephen was, well, he was killed, he was murdered by white thugs, racist thugs. Four or five more should be in prison, but they're not. The difference was that Sarah Everard was killed by a police officer. And a large percentage of the public has a romantic opinion about policing. All of your life and all of my life, we've been drip-fed a very positive, we've been drip-fed propaganda about the image of policing. So if you go all the way back to shortly after, well, just after the Second World War, the Metropolitan Police, corruption was high, police credibility with the community was exceptionally low, and so he literally went to what was then known as the Ministry of Propaganda. Okay. And they worked with Ealing, I think it was Ealing Studios, and they produced a film called The Blue Lamp, and it had a PC in there called PC George Dixon, and George Dixon epitomised what the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police at that time wanted the public to believe was the ideal police officer. And this ideal police officer was not particularly bright, streetwise, not bright, not dangerously clever, you know. Working class guy, ex-military, working class, knew the community, knew the Battens, respected by his superiors. In policing, there aren't superiors, by the way. There are senior officers, not superiors. Mm-hmm. But respected by his superiors, both in the service as well as externally. So it was this image of, and that image over since the Second World War has been developed.
Yeah,
it's a total false one. It's a piece of Hollywood. Well, it's not Hollywood. It's Pinewood. It's British propaganda studios from the Second World War. But it's a fictitious image. But the public have bought into this. And on top of that, people like myself, when I was at the College of Policing, I would go around the world, speaking to different police agencies, selling this image of community policing that was based on a fictional character. But so it was so successful, that fictional character, it became real. These comments will horrify many, many police officers, as they do when I go overseas as well. But it is a reality. So we need to get real. The public needs to get real about what does it really want from a police service? What does it want of its police service? There are core roles, and the police service needs to be far more transparent, open and transparent, and working with the communities that they represent. At a far lower level, I would suggest ward level, even postcode level. Here in London, not even postcode level, I would suggest even down to street level. So there needs to be greater community engagement. There should be local steering groups from the community at a far local level. There need to be far less people who look like me as community leaders. Okay? Self-appointed. It's the young people who need to be engaged, and mums and toddlers, etc., etc., etc. Not simply silver-haired old men who are hoping to get a gong. A member of the British Empire or something, and impressed by the borough commander getting the best bone china out. It's got to be people who are challenging. It's got to be.
Definitely.
Okay. So far too many people in community, and I am a councillor. I do. Up in Scotland, I am a councillor. So there is a place for those things, but it's about I should be a representative of the public as a councillor.
Yeah, definitely.
When I was in police service, I should have been. I'm in service to the public. So there needs to be back to the public. Public's number one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Public's
number one. That's how everyone ended it.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for coming in, Ruan. And thank you to our law students for putting the questions forward. Now, to our listeners, thank you for listening in, and we will be back, and do stay connected. If you wish to get involved with our Law, Policing and Justice podcast, please email the Legal Advice Centre at uel.ac.uk. And if you wish to explore more on the Law, Policing and Justice courses, please visit www.uel.ac.uk. And as always, thank you so much for listening in, and stay well.